Alright, and welcome everybody to another episode here on the channel, North Country Ham, with me, Aaron, KD2RSS. I'm going to do another video here, continuation on the study videos I've been doing for the extra class, Element 4. We're getting pretty well through the current question pool, so let's get into it. Alright, well I appreciate you hanging around, and again it's going to be a continuation here, going through some more of the current question pool for the Element 4 Amateur Extra class by the current book for 2020 to 2024 from Mr. West. So with that, before we get right into the questions, hey, if you like what I'm doing, or you like some of the stuff on the channel, the DIY projects and whatever, consider hitting that subscribe, and I appreciate it. So with no further ado, we'll get right into the question pool here. So the last one we got into the very next chapter, which was receivers with great filters. So we went through some questions there, so we'll get right into where we left off once I get set up here. So our first question of the night: a CW receiver with the AGC off has an equivalent input noise power density of minus 174 dBm hertz. And what would the level of an unmodulated carrier input to this receiver that would yield an audio output SNR of 0 dB in a 400 Hz noise bandwidth? Well, that question's going to be a mouthful. A, minus 174 dBm. B, minus 164 dBm. C, minus 155 dBm. Or D, minus 148 dBm. The weakest signal in a receiver can receive the weakest signal a receiver can receive is one that just above the total of all noise in the receiver. The background noise the receiver will see at room temperature is a minus 174 dBm per hertz. Add the noise caused by the receiver's bandwidth to the noise floor of the receiver, and you have the total noise. The receiver described in this question matches the minus 174 dBm per hertz noise of the background. So it is a theoretically perfect receiver, one with no noise floor of its own. Thus the weakest signal it can receive is minus 174 divided by 10 log bandwidth, as you can see here, equals noise floor, equals minus 174 divided by 10 times 400 equals negative 174 divided by 26 dBm equals minus 148 dBm. So the correct answer is D, and it kind of shows a little bit of a graph here. Noise floor in a receiver, and then your decibels and stuff on the side. It says modern HF receivers are so sensitive that their internal noise floor can't be appreciated due to the many external noises picked up from your own home electronics. So A CW receiver with the AGC turned off has the equivalent input noise power density of minus 174 dBm per hertz. What would the level of an unmodulated carrier input to the receiver that would yield an audio output SNR of 0 dB in a 400 hertz noise bandwidth? The correct answer is D, minus 148 dBm. And that is Greek to me. All right. What does MDS of a receiver represent? The meter display sensitivity, the minimum discernible signal, C, the multiplex distortion stability, or D, the maximum detectable spectrum. The minimum discernible signal is tested in the single sideband or CW mode with internal RF gain full on. Modern HF equipment has achieved extraordinarily low noise floors through product designs that minimize phase noise. So the correct answer is B. What does MDS of a receiver represent? B, the minimal discernible signal. And I apologize if there's too much glare. I'm still trying to figure that. Every time I adjust something, it still throws it off a little bit. So, next question here. Which of the following noise figure values is typical of low noise UHF preamplifier? A, 2 dB, B, minus 10 dB, C, 44 dBm, or D, minus 20 dBm. At UHF frequencies and above, the sensitivity of a receiver is generally limited by the internal noise generated by the front-end amplifying device or devices. This is because any noise generated in the front end along with the desired signal is amplified by all the subsequent stages. The formula for noise figure is noise figure equals 10 log 10F equals 10 log to the 10th times SNR in divided by SNR out equals SNR. It's a lengthy formula, and I'll try to see if we can there you go. That's a little better. So there's the formula. It's a mouthful to say, and I'm probably saying it wrong. Reposition the camera there. So, where SNR signal to noise ratio, when all the number crunching is done, we'll find that pretty decent front end will have a noise figure of about 2 dB. So the correct answer is A. So which of the following noise figure values is typical of a low noise UHF preamplifier? A, 2 dB. It seems like we're getting an awful lot of everything here on these questions. Okay. What is a crystal lattice filter? A power supply filter made with interlaced quartz crystals. B, an audio filter made with 4 quartz crystals that resonate at 1 kilohertz intervals. C, a filter using lattice-shaped quartz crystals for high Q performance. Or D, a filter with narrow bandwidth and steep skirts made using quartz crystals. The new worldwide transceiver you purchase will probably have some good single sideband and CW filters built in. The filters are made of quartz crystals and have a nice narrow bandwidth and steep skirts. You can buy accessory filters for a tighter response, but many times these will make your received signals sound pinched. Unless you do a lot of CW work, stay with the filters that come with the set. While crystal lattice and ladder networks are similar in purpose, they have different topologies. Lattice networks use pairs of crystals where the series resonant mode of one crystal is matched with the parallel resonant mode of a second one, with the combined output forming the desired bandpass shape. So the correct answer is D. So what is a crystal lattice filter? D, a filter with narrow bandwidth and steep skirts made using quartz crystals. Alright, move on to our next one here. Which of the following factors has greatest effect on bandwidth and response shape of crystal ladder filter? Is it A, the relative frequencies of the individual crystals? B, the DC voltage applied to the quartz crystal? C, the gain of RF stage preceding the filter? Or D, the amplitude of the signals passing through the filter? The bandwidth and response shape of a crystal ladder filter will be determined by the frequency of the individual crystals within that filter unit. A quartz crystal has the equivalent circuit to a resonant coil and capacitor circuit. While quartz crystal has both a parallel and a series resonant mode, it is generally the series resonant mode that is used for ladder filter. Several crystals can be strung together in a ladder configuration to form the equivalent of a filter circuit using a great number of coils and capacitors, but with much higher Q factors. So the correct answer is A. So which of the following factors has greatest effect on bandwidth and response shape of a crystal ladder filter? Answer is A, the relative frequencies of the individual crystals. Okay. Which of the following describes a receiver filter's ability to reject signals occupying an adjacent channel? A, a passband ripple. B, a phase response. C, a shape factor. Or D, noise factor. In general, the quality of a filter is determined by how rapidly the response falls off at the cutoff frequency. The filter that very abruptly goes from passing to stopping a signal as the frequency changes is considered to have a good shape factor. The response of a filter will have nearly vertical walls on each side of the passband. However, filter design is a balancing act of compromises. A very sharp filter may have some undesirable delay characteristics, which may or may not be a problem. In general, however, a filter used in, say, a single sideband filter should have as steep a shape factor as possible, using defined as a ratio of 60 dB attenuation to the 6 decibel attenuation bandwidth. So, correct answer is C. So which of the following describes a receiving filter's ability to reject signals occupying an adjacent channel? Answer is C, shape factor. Okay, and here's a good to know section. Getting to know your filters and shape. One of the most important parameters of a bandpass filter is the shape factor, sometimes called the skirt selectivity. An ideal bandpass filter response would look like a perfect rectangle if plotted on an amplitude versus frequency graph. Any signal within the two walls or skirts of the filter response would pass through the width no attenuation, while a signal outside of the walls would be completely cut off. Although it is impossible to build a filter with perfect shape factor, one having perfectly vertical walls, one can approach the response by using a filter with many poles or inductors or capacitors, or constructing a more modern digital filter. Primary characteristic of bandpass filter is defined as bandwidth of the filter at the 3 dB half-power attenuation points. The shape factor is normally defined as the ratio of the bandwidth of 60 dB attenuation points to the 3 dB attenuation points. Sometimes different endpoints are defined, such as 6 dB and 40 dB. In any case, a perfect brick wall filter would have a shape factor of a 1:1 or just 1 in the simplest terms. The primary bandwidth tells you how far apart the walls are, while the shape factor tells you how vertically they are. A simple single-tuned bandpass filter might have a very narrow primary bandwidth, but a very poor shape factor. Since single-tuned circuits have a haystack shape response curve, to achieve the more desirable rectangular shape factor, you might use a crystal lattice filter or a multi-pole filter such as a mechanical filter to achieve good shape factor. And it kind of shows the two different shape factors here, with your amplitude showing the 60 dB to the -6 and the -3. So kind of make that where you can see that a little better on there. So that's what we're looking at there on the two graphs. So the question on this page: which filter type is described as having ripple in the passband and sharp cutoff? A Butterworth filter, B, an active LC filter, C, a passive amp filter, or D, a Chebyshev filter. I think that's pronounced right. Look at the word Chebyshev. It almost looks like a ripple, doesn't it? So the correct answer is D, the Chebyshev filter. So which filter type is described as having ripple in the passband and a sharp cutoff? D, a Chebyshev filter. If I'm saying that right. Kind of shows a little bit of the Butterworth, the Chebyshev, and the elliptical. So, next question here. What are the distinguishing features of an elliptical filter? A, gradual passband roll-off with minimal stopband ripple. B, extremely flat response over its passband with gradually rounded stopband corners. C, extremely sharp cutoff with one or more notches in the stopband. Or D, gradual passband roll-off with extreme stopband ripple. Different types of filters fulfill different priorities with regard to cutoff or bandpass response. In audio applications, for instance, it is important to have very smooth transitions between bandpass and bandstop frequencies, with no abrupt phase changes. A Butterworth filter is commonly used for audio equalization for radio frequency work. It's generally important to have abrupt cutoff response, consistent with not too much ripple with the desired bandpass. The elliptical filter has the best performance with regard to sharpness of cutoff, but can have significant ripple in the bandpass. The less extreme response can be achieved with a Chebyshev type filter. Often different types of filters are used in cascade to achieve the best overall response. Correct answer is C. So what are the distinguishing features of an elliptical filter? Answer is C, extremely sharp cutoff with one or more notches in the stopband. Why would a direct or flash conversion, analog to digital converter, be useful for a software-defined radio, or SDR, as some have heard? A. Very low power consumption decreases frequency drift. B. Immunity to out-of-sequence coding reduces spurious responses. C. Very high speed allows digitizing high frequencies. Or D. All these choices are correct. Besides being the simplest kind of A to D converter to understand, the flash A to D converter is fast, hence its name. In the flash A to D converter, every bit is digitized at the same time. So the correct answer is C. And it shows a software-defined radio display below it. So why would a direct or flash conversion analog to digital converter be useful for software-defined radio? Correct answer is C. Very high speed allows digitizing high frequencies. Move along here on to the next question. So which of the following has the largest effect on SDR receiver's dynamic range? A. CPU register with width in bits. B. Anti-aliasing input filter bandwidth. C. RAM speed using the data storage. D. Analog to digital converter sample width in bits. Sorry about that. As in any digitizing process, the more bits or decimal places one has to work with, the more faithful the reproduction of the original signal. Fewer bits means more jagged steps in the waveform. Of course, accuracy has its price in the name of processing speed and power. The number of bits you use also determines the dynamic range, which is the difference between the smallest detectable signal and the overload point. So the answer is D. So which of the following has the largest effect on an SDR's receiver's dynamic range? Answer is D. Analog to digital converter's sample width in bits. All right. What is an advantage of having a variety of receiver IF bandwidths from which to select? A. The noise figure of a RF amplifier can be adjusted to match the modulation type, thus increasing receiver sensitivity. B. Receiver power consumption can be reduced when wider bandwidth is not required. C. Receive bandwidth can be set to match the modulation bandwidth, maximizing signal-to-noise ratio and minimizing interference. Or D. Multiple frequencies can be received simultaneously if desired. The occupied bandwidth of an amateur radio signal depends on the mode of the operation and the speed of the data, among the other factors. The best signal-to-noise ratio at the receiving end occurs when the receiver's bandwidth matches the bandwidth of the transmitting signal. In most, but not all, modern receivers, it is the intermediate frequency IF stage that determines the receiver's bandwidth. Most high-quality communications receivers have a number of IF bandwidths available, or even continuously variable IF bandwidth, to allow the best signal-to-noise ratio for any given mode. Answer is C. So what is the advantage of having a variety of receiver IF bandwidths from which to select? Answer is C. Receive bandwidth can be set to match the modulation bandwidth, maximizing signal-to-noise ratio and minimizing interference. Okay. Next question here. Why can an attenuator be used to reduce receiver overload on the lower frequency HF bands with little or no impact on the signal to noise ratio? A. The attenuator has low pass filter to increase the strength of lower frequency signals. B. The attenuator has noise filter to suppress interference. C. Signals are attenuated separately from the noise. Or D. Atmospheric noise is generally greater than internally generated noise even after attenuation. In many cases, it is advantageous to insert some RF attenuation in the front end of a receiver. Strong RF signals can overload a receiver, causing a number of undesirable effects, among them desensitizing the receiver to desired nearby weaker signals. Since most modern receivers have far more gain than is necessary, one can afford to sacrifice some gain to reduce the possibility of front-end overload. A good test for whether your receiver has adequate RF gain is whether you can hear atmospheric noise. If you can, you have all the receiver gain you can use. Any gain beyond this point simply amplifies the atmospheric noise. Correct answer is D. So, why can an attenuator be used to reduce receiver overload on the lower frequency HF bands with little or no impact on signal to noise ratio? Answer is D. Atmospheric noise is generally greater than internally generated noise even after attenuation. And we'll do this last question here for the night. That way you finish up that page. So, how does a narrow band roofing filter affect receiver performance? A. It improves sensitivity by reducing front-end noise. B. It improves intelligibility by using low Q circuitry to reduce ringing. C. It improves dynamic range by attenuating strong signals near the received frequency. Or D. All these choices are correct. And it's just kind of messing with the page here. IF stage roofing filters, like automatically selected 15 kHz, 6 kHz, and 3 kHz filters, may feature 4-pole fundamental mode monolithic crystal filter design to produce an ideal shape factor. The filters usually are positioned after the first mixer and significantly improve the third order intercept point performance for all stages that follow. Gordo appreciates the performance of roofing filters on 40 meters early in the morning when a nearby shortwave station numbs his receiver. Roofing filters improve the rig's dynamic range. Correct answer is C. So how does a narrow band roofing filter affect the receiver's performance? Answer is C. It improves dynamic range by attenuating strong signals near the received frequency. Alrighty. So that's probably, I don't know, like 12 questions, something like that we went over tonight. So I appreciate everybody swinging in and kind of going over the questions with me. We'll probably try to do another live stream of some of the questions like I've done in the past here in the future coming up. We get some more participation in there and some, people trying to guess some of the answers. I kind of enjoy that a little bit along with it. Kind of keeps it from being too dry. So I appreciate you watching, and leave any comments down below. I always try to read them and try to implement any suggestions, so I appreciate it. With that, I'll say 7-3 and get on the air.